The Nigerian Startup Act, several months after President Buhari assented the act, it has not been implemented and stakeholders are worried. We spoke with Iyin Aboyeji in Nairobi, Kenya. He's the founder and general partner of Future Africa to discuss why delay is deadly to the tech sector when it comes to the Nigerian Startup Act.
As President
I imagine that during the elections, the politicians are busy, but as this is with a federal agency, I don't expect the elections to be a significant factor in the program stalling. I don't know why it stalled, and I am quite surprised that it has stalled. And I think this is really the moment that the ecosystem, has to really watch and pray, if you may say so, to be able to ensure that the gains of last year, particularly with the president signing the Nigerian Startup Act, do not vanish into vapor because of non-implementation. This is the critical moment for all stakeholders to demand an update on the status of implementation of this act. And again, with the backdrop of the global economy and the contraction, which I had spoken about the last time I was on your show, again, it's even more important now more than ever that this is implemented.
We're 2 weeks away from the election. Are there any concerns among stakeholders like yourself that the act could be stalled further as the new administration finds its feet as it begins its rule?
Well, let us be very clear. The Nigerian Startup Act is Professor Muhammadu Buhari's legacy. So the talk of a new administration implementing it, I think, is unfair and should be reprehensible to not just the stakeholders, but to key people in government in this administration that worked very hard to make this happen. So I don't want to talk about the next administration. I think regardless of what administration it is, we need to be demanding accountability on the implementation of the act. We cannot allow the act to stall.
Can you remind us about the importance of the act with respect to Nigeria's tech ecosystem?
Again, I couldn't think of a more timely time for Africa, for Nigeria in particular, to pass this act within Africa. Because as we can all see, especially with recent times in the country, technology is vital to our lives. When the government made the decision to do the currency change, the one thing that could have made this a lot easier for a lot of people was if our startups had the capital and resources to rise to the occasion, to be able to provide the financial inclusion products and services that the market is desperately crying for. And this is why the Nigerian Startup Act has to be implemented. We need to provide our young innovators with the resources, with clear direction from government, and more importantly, with the enabling environment that they need to be able to succeed and build billion-dollar startups, very much like the ones that we have built a track record for. And again, there's a note of warning because, this year, as is often the tradition, there were a lot of articles that were published about the capital raising in the technology industry for this year. And one thing that's going on said is that Nigeria actually declined in capital raised between 2021 and 2022. If we do not want to see a further decline, which would have, smaller countries, that are very much kind of revving up their economies to be able to compete with us in the startup sphere. If we don't want to see that reversal of gains that have been painstakingly won over the last decade be rolled back, then we need to implement the Startup Act to enable our startups to be able to have the resources to execute against a very, very clear market opportunity, especially now at this time.
So is this, at this point, I'm guessing this is time bound. Do you want to see this before the handover in May? How much?
It has to happen.
Yeah?
The work needs to start yesterday, if I may say so myself. Stakeholders need to come together. We can't just have rallied and made all this noise for a bill to be signed and then shelved right? So we all need to rally, just like we did, again, and demand that Minister Pantami and NIDA work with us to actually implement the Nigerian Startup Act.
How soon, assuming full implementation, let's say it does happen, how soon do you think the impact will be felt on the tech ecosystem?
Look, there is a lot of capital on the sidelines that is waiting to see whether we are going to do what we promised, because it's now a matter of credibility for the ecosystem. If we're in a capital environment that is already depressed or compressed, and then we have a government that people may then ascribe negative connotations to as being unreliable or promising things they cannot fulfill, then we're ultimately going to lose out. And we can't wait till the new administration settles down to have this conversation. I mean, the reality is, like I said at the beginning of this is President Buhari and Minister Pantami's legacy. So it cannot be then passed on to another administration. It has to be implemented so we can see the impact.